welcome again to everybody to FDA drug approval process. I'm Gary Freeman, as she mentioned, and I have over 30 years experience having worked with the drug development process, lots of meetings with the FDA and so on for multiple pharmaceutical companies in my career. Now I'm serving as a consultant to the industry. And so today we're going to be talking about the drug development process, what sponsors must go through to get an investigational product from the lab setting all the way up through marketing in the United States by the Food and Drug Administration. It's the same for all companies, big and small. It doesn't matter what therapeutic area we're working on. It's very, very similar across the board. So let's get started. We have several learning objectives today. The first one will be to navigate through that process. What is it the drug company has to do from the beginning to the end? How do we get there? We often get asked that from novices out on the street. Some biotech companies will come to many of us as consultants for advice as to how to do it. How do we get through this magic that's out there? It's really not so much magic, but it's not written very, very clearly, to be very honest, for companies that are not really familiar with the whole process. So most of the time, biotech companies will use consultants to help them to navigate through the arena that we have to do. We're going to describe then what an IND is, investigational new drug, and what goes into that. What is it that the company applies with? What's the information that they have to have? We'll follow that up with what is a new drug application and what's involved in it. The purpose for that IND was let us test the product in human beings. The purpose for the NDA is let us sell that product, let us market it. So very different rationales for those two, although the data may be very similar. And we'll finally talk about, within the FDA, what is the IND and the NDA review process? How does it actually happen, as far as we know from the outside? So today we'll talk about, hopefully those messages are heard, and again, it doesn't matter if it's a rare disease or a mega blockbuster. A very similar process is going to be done from beginning to end. Obviously in the rare disease category, which FDA defines, by the way, as a rare disease, not the sponsor, because otherwise every sponsor would be claiming that it was a rare disease and trying to get a fast track and get approval for the product and then sell mega millions of dollars. So FDA is the gatekeeper of what is a rare disease, and based on results that you all get from surveys and such as to what the conditions are out in the United States. So the process will be very similar. We're going to be talking about the FDA's role then in drug development. Where does the FDA come in? What do they play? What do they do? Why do they care? We're going to talk about the logic of that whole drug development process. It is very logical. Some companies don't feel so. They think it's bureaucratic and just holding them up, but there is a logic to it. We're always looking for safety. That's the primary reason we do these studies, is for safety. The secondary one, of course, is efficacy. But we must always keep the patient first. Always, always, always. The first principle in good clinical practice is to keep ethics in our study, and we need to make sure that we are always serving the patient. That should be the first mission for every pharmaceutical company out there, and secondarily, we hope to find a cure for these diseases or a treatment for them, but never to put the patient into undue risk for the possible benefit of coming out clean in the clinical trial. So we're going to cite the basics of that non-clinical drug testing. People will ask, why do we do animal studies? We do those rather than immediately expose humans to these investigational products. We'd like to know from the animal model where we're potentially headed. Over time, the industry has discovered which animals are the most appropriate for which types of studies that might mimic human beings. And we'll talk to that when we get to the non-clinical piece. We're also going to talk then about the requirements for an IND. What is it that we have to do as a company to be able to present to the FDA rationale for testing in people? We'll look then at the clinical side. Once we have an effective IND, we can conduct clinical studies. So we'll be talking about those phases of study. How do we get there? And this is where we'll talk briefly about the rare disease moving a little bit faster, just because we don't have the numbers of people to put into these studies. It would take us generations to get thousands of people. So for rare diseases, we'll follow the same pattern but go quicker using different statistics. We're then going to talk briefly about once the studies are over, what do we do to present this information to the FDA? And that's done in the form of a new drug application. And lastly, we'll talk about once it is approved, what are the responsibilities of the sponsors to continue any kind of research? And we call those the phase 4 studies.